Jordan Peterson is making the rounds again. Obviously, he's joined Daily Wire, and they have this new project called Daily Wire Plus. Basically, they're churning out all of his old videos again, all of the old stuff. You'd have thought that I would be used to this kind of thing. You know, I'm British, so I'm used to people who say they're right wing and they're supposed to be representing the right, are just not right wing at all. They're classical liberals or they're neoliberals. Basically, they're individualists. Um, and they just don't understand corporatism, what corporatism really is. Fundamentally, they're just not right wing. Jordan Peterson especially is someone on British television who gets rolled out. Here is your right wing. Here is your representative on the right, and yeah, it's a little bit frustrating. To the point that I haven't made a lot of videos lately. I've been a little bit busy with family. I've had my 4th child recently. So yeah, just a little bit busy. But this is so very frustrating for me. I thought, okay, I haven't watched this video yet. This is Jordan Peterson talking about individualism versus collectivism, which is the best. And I think I probably know everything he's going to say, but I thought maybe it would just get a little bit off my chest, just to sit down and go through this and dissect what he's talking about. Prediction, I think he's going to say, National Socialism or fascism or something like that is collectivism, and it's over here on the left, like Dinesh D'Souza style. Communism and fascism, all collectivism is over on the left, and and individualism and capitalism, all of that stuff is over on the right. So individualism is basically right wing. He might not frame it quite like this with left wing, right wing talk, but that's basically what you're going to be left with in your mind. Kind of capitalism versus communism or socialism argument. I think that's where this is going to go. So let's just hit play and let's just see where we go. See how long I can get through this before I have to pause it.
I concluded and tried to lay out the rationale for this, that the fight between these two belief systems, but let's look at the belief systems. It's not communism versus the West. It's not communism versus the free market. It's different than that. It's collectivism in its far right form, let's say the far right form of the Nazis, and the far left form of the radical leftists, the communists. That's collectivism versus individualism. That's the fundamental conflict.
Okay, was that 33 seconds? Okay, what can I say? Yeah, I agree. Okay, the fundamental conflict is between individualism and, I wouldn't necessarily say collectivism, I would say corporatism. But where Jordan is totally wrong is that it's the individualism that is over on the left. It's the individualism that's over on the left, and corporatism, as in organic societies, where groups of people come together. They do. There's so much scientific data for this. When people come together in groups, they form something which is behaved so much like an organism. We have to call it an organic group, and this is an ancient, universal almost observation. The Confucian Chinese, the Hindu, the Indian system, including the caste system, Plato, and most of the ancient Greeks, they observed that human society forms something, and they would describe it like a human body. But they would observe that it formed an organism, and the scientific data has been backing that up. Even until today, human groups will seemingly independently select for genes. They have life cycles that are totally predictable. They have behavior patterns that are predictable. Don't need to go too much into that, but basically a traditional right-wing society. It's corporatist, it's organic, and you have individualism that wants to splinter off from that. Civilizations in decline become more and more individualistic. This is because civilization will grow to occupy a certain territory, and once there's no more need for martial values and the warrior spirit and dutiful masculine virtues, as well as a religion, to get you to think about something outside of yourself and your immediate gratification, to think about preserving um, the race, if you will, but sort of preserving the groups, or having children, thinking about things more in terms of eternity. Um, all of those things go out the window as competition turns inward, and people become more concerned with moneyed interests. You have dynasties trying to protect their little fiefdom that they've got within the empire, and individualism becomes the thing of the day. And yeah, so moneyed interest, mammon, starts to take control. And obviously this is the case with our civilization in decline, and especially with the levels of technology that we have total hyper individualism on steroids, however you want to put it. This is where we're at, and that is left wing. Okay, so how can you say communism is left wing? How can you say communism is individualism? How can you say over on the left where you have communism, that's individualism? Because Marxism, Bolshevism, socialism, all of this is based on the same assumptions of liberalism, that liberalism has about man and about society. You see, capitalism will, let's say liberalism will divide everyone up into these little atoms. We're each individuals, pursuing our own good, defining ourselves, finding our own purposes, sort of humanistically finding what's right in the world. And when we're divided up, when we're atomized like that, we we become a prey, basically, for any other kind of system that might form. We have all kinds of technological tools that will form super systems. I just talked about mammon. Money can form its own superstructure, its own self-propagating system. And so man, atomized man, just becomes absorbed into that larger system. It's an artificial system. It's not a corporate man, sort of uh, human-centered system. It's nothing like that. You just become a cog in a machine. And Marxism takes its cue from liberal ideas. It takes its cue from Hobbes and the idea of it's everyone against everyone, dog eat dog. Man is red in tooth and claw, and it's I can't remember the expression in Latin, but it's war of all against all, and you need a state to come in and to mediate between all these competing individual ideas. And this is how you get the liberal state, the modern Western liberal state, where to make sure that there's peace, we have to balance all these different competing ideas of what's right and what's wrong. There's no public creed, there's no religion, there's no public creed, except for that very statement that there are no public creeds. And so this is why the liberal state will favour minorities. Majorities represent consensus opinions. So, white majorities, Christian majorities, these are dangerous things to the liberal system. And so, yeah, liberalism will do whatever it can to kind of quash those things, whether that's through sort of immigration, sort of demographic equality, what can you say? No major religion, no kind of public religion, maybe on paper perhaps, but not in practice. And so, you need to have a pluralism of, religions, to an extent, political ideas. But you can't go against the public creed that there are no public creeds. Marxism is based on that. You see, where you have capitalism, where it's okay, we've all got, what can I say, not equality of outcomes, but we all just are thrown into this world, and maybe you start to incorporate some socialism there to mitigate capitalism. So you say, okay, let's try and have some equality of opportunity, so everyone's kind of on a level playing field to begin with, and then just let nature take its course. Communism is just a few steps further down the line to say, okay, well, somebody's accumulated some wealth. Well, this puts them, totally unequal playing field, and their outcome is just inevitably going to be greater than somebody else's. This is still going to lead to war. You're still going to have a working class uprising. The bourgeoisie, ultimately going to be overthrown. The landed gentry also, because you're just going to have this equality at some point. And so whether through, force or through, capitalism just failing and just, evolving into communism, you're going to have a kind of state-owned capitalist enterprise. Basically the state controls all of the means of production, and they try to level the playing field across the board. Why? Because of this liberal assumption, this fundamental individualistic liberal assumption that we're just all in this big war against, all against all, and we're all just these individuals. We have to be equal little cogs in this greater machine. It's no less individualistic, even though it wants all the little atoms in the system to be equal. So that's how, communism over on the left is individualism. Everything on the left is individualism. If Jordan Peterson is individualistic, he is on the left. Throughout history, universally, what we've seen over on the right is organic societies, and these are corporate. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's hear a little bit more from the good doctor.
And there are variants of the collectivist viewpoint, but it doesn't matter. They can be grouped under the rubric of collectivism. There's important differences, but we don't have to get into that. But the Western take wasn't collectivist, it was individualist. And the central idea of the West was that although people are obviously aggregate into groups, and many different groups, because all of you are members of many different groups, ethnicities, genders, sexes, races, family groups, community groups. You can be grouped a very large number of ways. And you tend towards the adoption of something approximating a group identity, because you take care of your family and you're a member of your community and you have a certain amount of justifiable patriotism in relationship to your state. The group identity is definitely part of who you are. The question is, what's the fundamental defining characteristic of who you are? And the collectivist definition is that you are the avatar of a collective, and that's fundamentally who you are. But the Western perspective is not that. The Western perspective is that despite the fact that people have an individual level and a collective level, the individual level is to be regarded as paramount. You're to be treated above all as an individual. Now, and I looked into that very deeply, and I thought, that isn't arbitrary, it's actually correct. That's the right way of looking at the world. And then you might say, well, what do you mean the right way? And of course, that's the right question, because that is the question. If something's the right way of looking at something, well, why is it the right way of looking at it? But I want to put a little spin on that too, because usually when we talk about individualism in the West, at least in the modern world, maybe let's say for the last 50 years or something like that, maybe it's after World War II, I don't know exactly the parameters, it doesn't matter, certainly since the 1960s. When we think about the tradition of individuality in the West, we think about the tradition of individual rights. And there's a problem with that, because the fundamental individual tradition of the West is not individual rights. And rights have a problem. Rights are sort of like your privilege compared to other people. I have these rights, and don't tread on them. That walls me off and makes me privileged in some sense. It means that I have the right to do things. I have the right to pursue my own interests. I have the right to pursue happiness, for example. That's explicitly laid out in the American system. The rights are what is special about me. And so when you look at individuality or individualism from that perspective, you can think about it as a selfish idea. And it's often criticized by collectivists precisely for that selfishness. But the fundamental idea of the individual in the West isn't predicated on rights, even though that's important. It's predicated on responsibility. Right? So your role as an individual in the West isn't to be the bearer of rights, of intrinsic rights, even though those are important. Your responsibility as an individual in the West is to bear the responsibility of an individual. And it's in bearing that responsibility that you set yourself right and your family right, and you keep the state on track. It's not from expressing your rights. It's from shouldering your responsibility. And I would say,
I think he's deliberately obfuscating this. Okay, he said a lot there. Okay, but basically, first he was talking about how collectivists see you as an avatar of a group. Yeah, you are an avatar of a group. I mean, this is so tied into what he's talking about responsibility. Well, the Western idea is individuals have responsibility. Okay, who holds them responsible? How? Through what mechanisms? I'm sorry, but you are, really, the problem is that there isn't actually such a thing as an individual. There isn't actually such a thing as an individual. Does that sound a bit radical? Does that sound a bit crazy to you? Let me explain. At a certain point, no, I mean, you can't be divided out of the group. At no point in your development, up to a certain age, are you going to survive, certainly not have a functioning brain, not have a language, nothing, if you did not have the unconditional love of your mother growing you in her womb. Certainly, after you came out, you had to have some unconditional, unreciprocated love and care from someone. That involved physical affection, otherwise your brain wouldn't have even developed properly. You had to be given a language in order to have any building blocks at all in your brain, to be even to listen to this talk, to have any kinds of opinions on it. Necessarily within that you were enculturated. And you had all kinds of ideas that were, at the very least, co-constructed in your brain. You have all kinds of metaphors, all manner of ideas that are like tremendous underground minds, tremendous things undergirding what you perceive up at the surface level of your consciousness. And you cannot be aware of all of it. At a certain point, you cannot be removed. You are necessarily an avatar. You want to say, oh no, I don't come from any kind of background. I've got blue hair, so I am totally different. I'm just going to decide I'm so unique. I'm going to come up with my totally unique identity. And you're saying all of that in English, dressing as a Western person, um, you know, unable to escape from your genes, uh, unable to escape from all kinds of appetites and inclinations you have. Um, you're unable to escape from the desires you have for certain things, which you're genetically predisposed to. And why should you want to? Why exactly do you want to? Why are you running away from the natural order? Why are you desperate to escape? Even to the point of being a transhumanist. You want to your conscience to be your consciousness to be removed from your body and uploaded into a computer or something. Why are you so desperate to get away from being an avatar of a group? Why does that matter to you? The second point he raises there is, oh well, the idea in the West of individualism is that you have responsibility. This is just nonsense. This is just nonsense. I mean, I've written on this. Ricardo Duchenne, who's actually a brilliant guy, um, but he's written on this, masterpieces. The Western man, the individualism in the West was not this kind of hyper-individualism, decide whatever you want to do for yourself thing. Where did it come from? Where did it start? We look at ancient Greece, and they were all living in a polis, sometimes translated city-state, but that doesn't quite do it justice, because um, the people were so integrated with each other, and they had such a sense of themselves being integral parts of this group, this natural order. Everyone had to be playing their part. It was very organic. Um, I could talk about that for ages. I won't go off on a tangent here. But that's where this kind of Greek individualism started, which forms so much of the individualism in the West. I mean, if you want to go further back than that, Europeans, especially Northern Europeans, are descended from Indo-European nomads. So these were like quite psychopathic individuals who engaged in berserker warfare. And so they were very, very individualistic, to the point of wanting this personal glory, that they would strip naked and have this berserker warfare. And it didn't matter if they died, because their name would have this glory and this honor. And they so cared about the kudos that they would get from their warrior peers, that they would respect there being other lords and other kings, and that there would be an aristocracy, because they wanted the respect from their peers. And so, in that sense, individualism then sort of morphed into what we start to see more in the Greco-Roman world, where, yes, you had the individual paterfamilias, he was the head of his family, and he had his gods on his hearth, and the law for his home, and him being the head of his household, was fundamental. But then it was a part of a much larger civic law, development that was going on, very uniquely in the West, where you had, okay, certainly you had the individual, but the individual had to be a part of something greater. So you had the great example of this is the Greek phalanx. So you had all the men lined up with their shields. If they were on their own, if they were an individual, they would die. They had to be a part of this group, forming something which behaved almost differently, it behaved independently. Yes, they could have their individual, um, he wants to say rights. I mean, even that is wrong. A right in the Western historical sense, certainly in the Catholic sense, is a thing you have. It is your good. This is my right, this thing. It's not some abstract, well, you don't get to tell me what to do. It's not negative rights per se, like he's trying to make out, because you're in a phalanx. You have all the other men there who are depending on you to do the thing. You come up and you defend the other guy, and you come to the front of the shield wall, and you're a part of something bigger than you. You're a part of an organic collective. Yes, you have your individual say. Yes, in the polis, landowning men had to take their turn to be in the government, to be in the sort of Senate, if you like, the local council. But you were always a part of something much bigger. So this thing that Jordan Peterson's doing is very misleading. It's very misleading. You're not an avatar of a collective. You're an individual. But somehow individuals just take responsibility. You just got to go and clean up your room, and you just got to find it in yourself. What, in this world, in these countries, Western countries, which don't care about their own people, the suicide rate for young Western men is extraordinarily high. And what you're just going to tell them, just go and clean up your room, just continue being a good little cog in the machine, this individualist capitalist machine, which is really the right wing. At that point, where does this young man have anything that's going to be sticking up for him, giving him a group identity, which he fundamentally needs? He has a fundamental biological need to be an avatar of a collective. And you're telling him, well, no, because that's communism. Or even worse, you're a Nazi and that makes you bad or something. What is this? What is it? How is this guy helping young men exactly? And then he boasts and says, oh, I've stopped so many young men from developing some kind of ethnic collective identity, which would be awful. Why would that be awful? The guy does a whole series on the book of Genesis or something, which was developed by a strongly ethnocentric nation that developed in the Middle East. And he's talking about how great and relevant it is for all of us. Okay, so why are young Western men not allowed that? I don't really want to at this stage, but let's hear what he has to say for the rest of the video.
That the reason that you have rights in the West is so that you can shoulder your responsibility. It's not the other way around. It's so that you can do what's best on your behalf, and in that manner do what's best on your family's behalf, and in that manner contribute to the degree that you can to the community. And that if you do all those things simultaneously, which means to accept the responsibility for that, then things move ahead as well as they can move ahead, which doesn't necessarily mean well, because life is very difficult and there's no sure way through it. There's only less bad approaches. That might be a way of thinking about it. And the least bad approach you can manage is to shoulder your responsibility as an individual.
An individualist society is not the least bad.
And I would say that one of the things that drives the collectivist ethos, which is often formulated in terms of compassion for the oppressed, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later, is actually a deep desire to, at all costs, avoid that responsibility. And it's no wonder, because the responsibility is overwhelming. You say the world fundamentally is a tragic place, right? It's a place in which each of us is broken, and it's contaminated by the ever-present reality of betrayal and malevolence. And to shoulder the responsibility, first for even admitting to that, and second for assuming that you are duty-bound, let's say, to do something about that, well, that's a task that anyone who has his or her eyes open should be leery of accepting. And I would say, well, perhaps there's no credible reason for accepting it, except that every other alternative is worse. And so that's a brutal fact. So the antidote to collectivism is individualism, but it's not the individualism of the privileged person with rights. It's the terrible burden of the individual who determines that he or she will shoulder their responsibility to the utmost.
Okay, once again, I'm kind of going to be repeating myself a little bit, but this is so completely misleading. It's dangerously misleading. I mean, he might just be genuinely confused. He might just be, like some boomer, genuinely thinking this is capitalism versus communism, stuck in that like Cold War neoliberal mindset. Jordan Peterson may just genuinely be there, and he might not have any of these things I'm talking about as considerations in his mind at all. He might not have any of this equipment to work with, but this is just nonsense. When you have a civilization in decline, as we have now, and it becomes very, very individualistic, and people just become concerned about their selfish, moneyed interests, the only thing that will, reverse this and preserve civilization is to have a collective religion, have a collective identity, and it's through those groups, those organic groups, that you will have men imposing responsibilities and duties on each other. To just say, oh, well, okay, we're getting so totally individualistic, but Jordan Peterson's just going to come along and talk about lobsters, and then we're all just going to say, you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to take responsibility. Again, for what? For what? Okay, for your family. Okay, let's say you don't have a great family. Let's say you have a family who are so totally absorbed in the individualistic, the system as it is, and they kind of resist you. What do you do then? And it talks about this community. Where is this community in the individualist society? What community? They're all artificial communities. You have soldiers coming back from war with PTSD, and where are their real organic communities of people who genuinely care about them? No, you just have these sort of help groups where they artificially put a bunch of people together and they kind of just go and talk. Do any of them actually care about each other? Are they invested in each other? No. You need a corporatist, organic society where people are genuinely all stakeholders in the same projects. Everyone has a shared religion, so they've got shared vision. They have a genuinely what am I trying to say here? They have a genuine reason to care for each other. They have this sort of eternal perspective. They're thinking outside of themselves and their immediate gratification. You don't get that with individualism. Individualism is a symptom of a collapsing society. It is not a solution. It's the symptom of the collapse. The solution is what builds the civilization in the first place, which, as I've said, is masculine virtues, duties, all of these kinds of things, none of which is individualistic. Yeah, you might be able to say, I have rights in my household, I have rights to stuff because I'm a part of the group and I'm a useful part of the group. Whether that's your family or whether that is an actual community that you're a part of. But no, you don't get that in individualism. Where is this community? What, the cafe you go to? They kind of just want you there for money. They don't want you there for you. You're not involved in the same project. What's the project that you're all involved in? What, increasing GDP? What is this shared project? It doesn't exist. Yeah, so I think I've said enough there. Jordan Peterson is left-wing because he's individualist. Individualism is left-wing. Corporatism, organic, traditionalist societies, that's right-wing. Jordan Peterson is in dreamland if he thinks that with individualism you're going to get more and more responsibility, because individualism is the symptom of a society which has rejected responsibility. So yeah, he's a gatekeeper. He's basically just standing at the gates of having a real organic society and a group identity, saying, no, 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 turn back. You don't want to go this way, or you're basically just a horrible Nazi or something. But you know, I'm a Catholic. I absolutely believe that humans have a fundamental need to be a part of an organic society, to be a part of a body, a real body, and denying them that this is and trying to prop everything up with these artificial groups and these artificial societies. This is death. This is a civilization in its death throes. And calling for more individualism, calling for more of the same, and telling people to clean up their room when, you know, what exactly is the motivation for that? What money, more of the same? It's not helping. So no, I don't think Jordan Peterson is helping. I certainly don't think he's the smartest man in the world, as Daily Wire put it. No, thank you. I'm not buying it. Yeah, so like and subscribe. I'll try to do more things like this. Yeah, thank you for your support. Go and buy my book or something like that. Or go to, you know, click on my Buy Me a Coffee or something like that. But yeah, try to develop in your own life your own organic communities, big and small. Be a part of your local traditional church. You know, if you can, start, and you know, you've got passion and you have an idea, start a business and follow some kind of actually decent cooperative model. Create a corporation where you are investing in good, solid people around you, and they will invest in you, and you're a part of something very real organic community. There are great models, great business models out there, just waiting to be followed, like Mondragon in I think it's Spain, Mondragon, or Mondragon, however it's pronounced. That's a multi-billion-dollar company, and you know, it's cooperative. People invest in each other, and that's a good thing. You know, governments, we should be encouraging governments to take away tax and that sort of thing for these kinds of cooperatives, because, you know, it's less of a burden on the government if we're all looking after each other. But perhaps that's a topic for another time. God bless you all. Thanks for listening, and hopefully see you soon.